Westlake STEM Junior High.
My name's Michelle Jones. I'm a 9th grade math teacher at Cypress High School.
My name is Samantha Robinson, and I teach 7th grade English at Kennedy Junior High School in West Valley, Utah.
Self-reported grades by students is just a way for students to have a grasp or get an idea of how well they are doing on the different standards or concepts that they're working on in the classroom.
Student self-reporting grades is when a student actually monitors their own education. They set goals for themselves, they predict what they are going to have as an outcome, and as they do that, then they say, this is what I want to be, how am I going to reach there, and they set the goals to do that, and then they continue to monitor that. So it's a continual look at the goal that they set, usually midterm and then at the end of the quarter, and then they set new goals to continue on.
Is students reporting themselves, like analyzing and doing metacognition on what they think their grade is.
According to Hattie's research, it's something that's really effective in helping students to succeed, and also when the students know what's expected of them and how to do it, I've seen my student success rates score in the classroom.
The first goal is that students understand what the grade they get means. So it's not, oh, I got an 80 because my teacher randomly gave me that. There's understanding behind how I, as a teacher, grade their work and why the work is valuable, and what mistakes mean in terms of proficiency, in terms of understanding the mathematics. So I think a large part of it, at least for me, is that students really understand what their grade means to them. I think another part of student self-reported grading is students having some feeling of control and buy-in to the grading process.
The purpose of this strategy really is to make kids accountable for their own learning. You know, as a teacher, we can tell them you're not doing well in school, your grades are failing, you need this, and I want this for you to be successful. But if a student doesn't actually say, this is what I want and this is how I'm going to accomplish it, they'll never actually get there.
One of the ways that I implement this in my classroom is I teach in units, and so before school even started, I went through the standards that I have and I made student-friendly I can statements, and then those statements I give to the students at the beginning of each unit in their packet. So you can see here they have their different standards listed, and then the students have an opportunity to read through and do a pre-self-assessment where they will rate themselves, and then they'll do a post self-assessment at the end, and then once they actually receive their scores, they will personally handwrite and put their scores in as well, so they can see how they started, how they thought they were, and how they actually ended up doing on the different assessments.
The first thing that I do is I have a pre-assessment or show the students what the standard is that I'm grading them on. So for example, I can solve multi-step inequalities and absolute value equations. So that's what they're being graded on. And we have the standard number, which is what it is. And then they do, once I show them several of those problems, or they do a pre-assessment on several of those problems, they then, before I've taught anything, are able to have a pretty good self-indicator or self-understanding of where they're at the very, very beginning. I frequently have starters where they analyze themselves as we progress through the standard and go back and either ask them to create questions. You know, what kind of question would you expect on this quiz or on the next unit test or on a homework, you know, from today's lesson? Or I throw candy at them a lot and ask them what kind of questions they expect to see, you know, on the next unit test. And so that way they have a real understanding of what it is that they're supposed to be learning in my class, and always kind of self-reflecting on where they are in the moment, you know, over the like course right before we take the final assessment, the summative assessment, I have them do a post evaluation. So before you take this test, how do you feel? You know, do you feel now that we've gone over this stuff for the last, month or whatever, are you still a red? Have you moved to a yellow? Are you a green? And so that they can kind of have their own metacognition again about how have we worked through this material and what progress have they made and what learning has happened. And also, like, my kids work so hard, seriously. Like, my students are the hardest working students. It always amazes me how frequently I have 15 and 16-year-olds in my classroom at 6:30 in the morning, or staying until an hour after school. And then I really like incorporating the 8 math practice standards, because those are the soft skills of mathematics, into their student self-reflection and self-reporting. Because how you get better at math is persevering in problem solving, and that's the first math practice standard. How you get better at mathematics is, being precise, which is probably one of the most difficult components of mathematics, is the precision of it. And going back and checking your work and making sure you read the directions, because no human on earth likes to read directions. So all those like soft skills I incorporate into the self-reporting process, even though my standards are only skill-based.
I have a couple things that I can show you. First of all, at the beginning of the year, we focus on our reading inventory, our grade level reading, and what we actually, what grade level we read on. So students will look at the chart and where they need to be by the end of the year, and then they predict where they're going to be and where they're currently at. And then we take our first assessment, and they analyze where they're at, and they look at the scale and they say, oh, well, I'm only on a 6th grade level, but I need to be on a 7th grade level. So what kind of things do I need to do to get there? So they might make goals about reading at home, working in class on reading strategies, maybe they don't understand comprehension questions, or maybe they need work on vocabulary, those types of goals. And then we take the test 2 more times in a year. And so right before we take it, in fact, we're going to be taking it next week, they on Monday will pull out their paper, look at what their score was, and they'll say, okay, this is what I've been working on. My goal was to improve my vocabulary, to read at home. Did I meet that goal? And they'll write out for me, and I'll read those, and they'll say, yes, I met my goal, and this is how I met it. Or no, I didn't read at home every night. I maybe missed 2 or 3 days. And when I take this test again, this is what my score should be, because I've been doing these things. And we'll take the test, and then they'll analyze their score. If it doesn't meet that, then they have to reflect and explain, why didn't that meet their goal? Why didn't they get the score that they predicted that they were going to get? And if they did, what did they do to get that score? And then they go back through, and then they set new goals. So I always encourage students, if you didn't meet your goal the first time, you probably have some things you need to continue working on, so that should be part of your goal again. And then if you did meet it, how are you going to push yourself even further? And we do that another time right in May, right before they move on to 8th grade. And then another thing that they do is each quarter I have them create goals for their academic grade. And they just get a little paper like this. It's really simple, has 3 numbers, and they have to set goals, how they're going to be successful in my classroom. So just simply reflect on your goal. Go back to your paper. Where are you at currently? What can you improve? Have you already met your goal? Or do you need to make some tweaks because you're not working on it and you're really far behind, and by the end of the quarter, are you going to meet it? And so they do a lot of reflection on themselves and really process through what a goal is.
I've seen it be really motivating for students to know how they are doing in class. Besides doing the pre and post assessments, we are regularly doing check-ins, so we have kind of like our bell work at the beginning of class, and so students will have different questions reviewing that have an I can statement, and they will self-assess after we grade those. If they were red, I didn't get it, I need some help. Yellow, I can do it with some help or maybe with my notes. And then green, I can do it all by myself. And that gives students an opportunity to see where they're at with each standard and I can, and it gives us an opportunity as a class to go over and actually see how they can improve. So a lot of times we'll take student samples and we'll say, okay, this is like, what is this? Is it a 1, 2, 3, or 4? How can we move this 3 to a 4? Or it's a 2 right now, what do we need to do to make it a 3?
I feel like my students really understand the grades that I give them better. I feel like my students are able to self-advocate for themselves much more effectively because they know what I'm expecting of them to reach a certain standard, right? What does an A mean? What does a B mean? What does a D minus mean? And so that's something that I speak about specifically and clearly in my classroom, because if they don't know, they're not going to be able to self-report on it. I also think that my students are willing to work harder because they feel like they have culpability in the grades they get, rather than, again, it just being an external, oh, the teacher gave me blah.
The impact is astronomical, actually. Students value their education. When I talk to my students about where they stand in my class, they can tell me what their grades are. They can tell me what the expectations are. They can tell me what they need to still be working on. They are accountable and know the ins and outs of them. And what I really like is it's really built a relationship between the two of us more than anything. It's allowed us to connect and have more personal conversations. I've learned a lot about my students' families because of the goals that they're setting. You know, my mom is never home, and so I have a hard time getting to school, but these are the things that I'm going to do to make sure my alarm goes off and that I'm getting here on time. And that's allowed me to support my students even more. And their grades have gone up, their quality of work has gone up because they have a tie-in and a buy-in to it because they want to be successful.
I'm Gwen.
I'm Hayden. What I did is I thought about what I want to complete at the end of the year, and I wrote that down, and I work on it throughout the year.
Yes, so when we set goals at the beginning of the year, I wanted to know like what I can improve at to be able to enjoy class more and learn more. And so I set my goals around that.
I set goals to have a checkpoint to meet at like the end of the semester or the end of the term or something like that.
I do my goals so I can improve in the best way I can and be successful.
At the end of the year, I see my grade was to do good in the class. So I go and I check my grades, and if those have improved throughout the year, then I know that I have completed my goal.
I try to check my goals as often as I can, and if there's something I need to change with how I'm doing so far, I try to work on being better on that.
For me, if I set goals, like in the future and stuff, I have something I can work towards. If I don't set goals, I'm just kind of there, not doing anything.
I think it's really good practice for if you do goals now and keep up with them, it's way easier in the future when you may need them more.
The biggest challenge to implementing student self-reporting grades is the time it takes to actually teach kids how to do it. They're not used to reflecting on themselves. They're young. You know, they're used to someone telling them how to think, and I'm trying to have them think more critically and having them do a self-reflection. That metacognition and thinking about yourself is difficult, and sometimes the hard reality of I'm not being successful in class, it's not my teacher's fault anymore, it's not my parents' fault anymore, it's mine. And that accountability that they're held to, they struggle with.
Time is really the hardest part because it takes time out of your class, right, to have these conversations. It takes time to do it well because the best self-reported grades are when I go around and have a one-on-one conference, right? Why did you write this? What do you think? Have you thought about? You should be celebrating, because especially when you start, students have a really hard time acknowledging or being aware of when they've made an accomplishment, when they've made progress. And so unless I'm there to help them see that, the impact of it is diminished.
The hardest part I think about implementing this is probably just that beginning part of figuring out what are my standards, how can I break this down into something student friendly, and then how can I show that to my students and show them examples of not just what proficient is, but pushing them beyond that expected proficiency. I know for my students, that's one of their biggest frustrations now in their other classes, because in my class, they're seeing what a 1 looks like, what a 2 looks like, what a 3 looks like, what a 4 looks like, because we're using proficiency-based grading. And in their other classes, they're not seeing that. So they're frustrated because they do want to push themselves. It's very self-motivating for them, but they don't know how. So it's just really important that the students do have those keys so that they can push themselves and know how they're doing.
Just know that it's never going to be perfect, and that's okay. Like, it's a process. I still am not completely satisfied with how I'm implementing it. I still feel like there's so much for me to learn and do better. And when I first started it, I was so nervous about letting go of some of that control, I think, but also doing it right. Use the resources around you, talk to teachers who are trying this, and steal their good ideas. The students have to have a very clear understanding of what their grade is about. And that means that you as a teacher have to be able to explain it to them. And in order to explain it to them, you have to have a clear personal understanding of what it is that your grade means. And I think that that is something that's very powerful about it, is a very, having that clarity of this is what I'm grading, this is why, here's the different levels, and this is why I'm gonna grade it at those different levels. Whether you're doing, 1, 2, 3, 4, or percentiles, or whatever it is, I don't think that matters at all. I think what matters is that you are very, very clear on what each level means. So what does an A mean? What does a B mean? What does a C mean?
If you're wanting to start on student self-reported grades, I think a really important thing to do first of all is to figure out how you are grading and what you are expecting from your students, because if you don't have those expectations in place, it makes it really hard to teach those expectations and have students know them so that they can actually self-report their grades.
Be patient. Take the time. Yes, it's going to take class time. It's not going to happen overnight. My students were not perfect at it the first 3 weeks. And I would say they're not even perfect now, starting second quarter, middle of second quarter, almost midterm of second quarter. I still have to walk them through it. We still have to talk about what a goal is, why is it important, how does it value your life, and where is it going to take you in the future.